Okay, so I'm Dennis Ferraro. I'm a extension wildlife specialist and a professor of practice, and I teach about wildlife mainly as a conservation biologist and herpetologist, but I do teach UNL's course on resolving human-wildlife conflicts, which a lot of landscape students take. And this is just a small piece of that course on how you can resolve those conflicts with wildlife in the landscape. And I'll go through what I think and what has been brought to me as the most prominent species causing conflicts and how to resolve those. And I'll leave some time where you can bring up some others that I don't get to, and I'll hopefully be able to help you with those. So one thing I want to go about, we're talking about the landscape and we're talking about wildlife. We have to remember that to us, it's our landscape. It's our pride and joy. But to all wildlife, it's their habitat. And they have been here and adapted in that habitat for eons, even before we've made it our landscape. So we have to remember that, yes, wildlife can really cause problems, so to speak, break our landscape because of their natural tendencies either to feed on something, to burrow in some area, or to just trample on things. But having a nice landscape where you have biodiversity, a lot of animals, pollinators, mice, birds, everything, to me adds to that landscape. And it also adds to the plant material if you have the biodiversity, because there's a lot of things, you know, some trees won't grow unless a squirrel chomps into them first and buries that seed. Okay, so it's a symbiotic relationship between wildlife and the plant material. And the plant material that's native with the wildlife that's native, they do fine together, okay? They have adapted and they've been here for eons together, and there's not a problem there, okay? But when we want certain things different than the native, and the wildlife wants it the old way, that's when we have some of these conflicts. So when we talk about wildlife in the landscape, we have to remember that it's a habitat to the wildlife. And what wildlife is looking for is a couple of things: water, food, and shelter. And that shelter is to hide from the conditions and allow them to have young and propagate. So if you give them, with your landscape, any of those, food, water, or shelter, they will come. Okay? So I also give a lot of talks on making your landscape come alive, how to bring in. And I always think out of the box, like, yes, not just songbirds. You know, you want hawks too. So if you want hawks, what do you need for the hawks? You want food? Bring the voles in. That'll bring in the owls and hawks. Okay? And that's what I've done in my landscapes. But everybody wants to landscape a different thing. Why do we have these encounters? Because we're sharing the same space. Spatially, we are sharing it. Okay? And because we share, we have encounters. Now, a lot of the encounters are because we're pushing wildlife to smaller and smaller locations, especially in Nebraska. You gotta remember, this used to be all tall grass prairie and then mixed grass prairie and short grass prairie and sand hills. How much of that is agriculture and urbanized? About 90 to 95% of the state has either been changed from that native habitat to either agriculture or urban. So these animals who always wanted to be in the riparian areas with trees, in the native deciduous forest, or the mixed grass prairie or the tall grass prairie, they're being pushed into these little tiny spots. And as we push them more, as we grow our cities and towns, we're going to even get more of that conflict. The other thing is, we have done a lot to cause problems for them, and that's with our domesticated animals, primarily dogs, cats, but also such things, if you think about out west, with our domesticated livestock. They have brought on diseases. I don't know if you realize it, but almost all wildlife have cat fleas, which are tropical cat fleas, brought here with our cats. Okay? So people say, oh, I don't want those animals, that raccoon running through my yard. I'll give my dog and cats fleas. No, no, it's the opposite way. It may give them some of them back to your dog and cat, but all the raccoons have cat fleas that were given to them by your dogs and cats. Same thing with distemper and rabies. and plague. Okay, all those things came across with European invasion into this country, for the most part. Okay, again, I've been through this. Again, they want water, food, and shelter, so we provide it, and of course, space to grow. So the first one we're going to talk about, because it seems to be the one I get the most amount of questions and hits on my website, for those people in other locations, besides the book, which you should have in your packet, which will be redone a little bit coming up. We do have a new website. In your book, it talks a lot about a website called the International or Internet Center for Wildlife Damage Management.org, or that's going to be coming down, but it's being replaced and has been replaced by a launch that took place almost a year ago, and that's wildlife.unl.edu. Really simple. And there's a whole section, the first section on damage, which has all our NEB guides and videos and everything. And then there's a section on identification of wildlife, a section on conservation, and also a section on wildlife diseases that goes to our One Health site for the state. So definitely, if you have questions that are not answered today, please try this site first. And if you have problems, you just hit Ask the Expert, and that comes to my phone.